Go back, he cried. Go back to the land of Mordor and follow me no more. His voice sounded thin and shrill in his own ears. The riders halted, but Frodo had not the power of Bombadil. His enemies laughed at him with a harsh and chilling laughter. Come back, they called. To Mordor we will take you. Go back, he whispered. The ring, they cried with deadly voices, and immediately their leader urged his horse forward into the water, followed closely by two others. By Elbereth and Luthien the Fair, said Frodo with a last effort, lifting up his sword, you shall have neither the ring nor me.
Welcome to the Wayward Wizards podcast. I'm Logan.
And I'm Zach.
And we are reading Chapter 12, Book 1, Fellowship of the Ring, Flight to the Ford.
Last chapter of the book.
Exciting.
Here we go. The Flight to the Ford.
It's a busy chapter.
I think it's probably the fastest moving chapter of the book so far.
Yeah.
So much going on.
They've just gotten attacked by black riders. Frodo got poked in the shoulder by a Morgul blade. Although maybe we don't learn that until this chapter.
Yeah, I think we definitely get a sense of the real danger that he's in. But yeah, they have to make a mad dash to Rivendell, and the whole time they're just like, all right, like we're trying to get to the ford of the River Brunnen, and we don't know what's going to be there when we get there. And they just kind of have no other choice. They're like, we're just going to try to get there. And if we're met with black riders at the bridge, then, we'll just have to, deal with that when we get there.
Yeah. There's one way to go. I mean, their goal has been Rivendell this whole time. Right. And so they know that, well, obviously they know they've been attacked. They also don't quite understand why the black riders haven't attacked again.
Yeah.
Strider kind of goes and looks around. I think it's still dark. He goes and looks around.
Yeah.
A little. Sam is, of course, still having doubts about Strider.
Yeah, it says that he doesn't. He starts to have doubts about Strider again, and he pulls his sword on Strider.
I think at this point it's like, come on, Sam. Like, this guy's a good dude. He's not out here trying to like attract black riders to you or something like that. I don't know, but
I do think it's funny. Like we mentioned, like how rarely people pull swords on each other in this book, like compared to maybe how we might imagine.
Yeah.
But in the very first chapter, Bilbo pulls a sword on Gandalf, or like goes to pull a sword on Gandalf. And in this chapter, Sam pulls a sword on Aragorn, and it's like, all right, these hobbits are like down to.
Yeah. Once a hobbit has a sword, he's ready to rumble.
They're like, oh yeah, we don't really ever think we were going to carry swords, but 5 seconds later, whoosh,
now that I have one.
Strider.
Yeah, he pulls it on Strider, and Strider says, "I'm not a black rider, Sam, nor in league with them."
Yeah,
but yeah, he says, "I don't know why they've gone and don't attack again, but there's no feeling of their presence anywhere at hand," and that comes up a couple times. This idea that you can kind of feel the foreboding nature of these, entities. Glorfindel also has that feeling that he says something, he has a feeling in his heart about something being behind them. And so that's a common thing, that there's a way in which you can kind of sense the presence of these awful, creatures.
And I think last episode you left us asking, like, why didn't the Black Riders just use their sword to like just chop little Frodo in half?
Yeah.
Because it seems like they could have, but yeah, it seems like and I think we'll probably get some more insight into this in the first chapter of book 2 before the Council of Elrond. But it seems like they would rather wound him in a way that would turn him into a wraith than have him die. And that would be more useful to them, but also just more pleasing to them as evil, maniacal beings. Like Strider here says, they will come again another night if we cannot escape. They're only waiting because they think that their purpose is almost accomplished and that the ring cannot fly much further. I fear, Sam, that they believe your master has a deadly wound that will subdue him to their will. We shall see. So it seems like they're just convinced that if they just wait Frodo out, he'll become a wraith like them, and then they can just command him to come with him back to Mordor. But Aragorn, he says to Sam, don't despair. Like, Frodo is way tougher than even I guessed, or even as I might have guessed by what Gandalf had to say about him. He's made of sterner stuff. And he says, he is not slain, and I think he will resist the evil power of the wound longer than his enemies expect. So their plan has a flaw, which is that they don't reckon with how brave and indomitable the wills of the hobbits are. And
willpower comes into the chapter a lot. I guess that's a huge part of Frodo's story, right? Is the will to keep walking and the will to resist the ring. And something about this wound is similar in some way to the effects of the ring, the like wraithification process.
Yeah.
Maybe faster, but yeah.
They find the cloak of the Black Rider, and he says there's a slash, and that was from the stroke of Frodo's sword. It says, the only hurt that it did to his enemy, I fear, for it is unharmed, but all blades perish that pierced the dreadful king. More deadly to him was the name of Elbereth. So we have a king like capitalized here. So pretty much already, like Aragorn seems to know this is the Witch King of Angmar.
Right.
And this is definitely like a little bit of foreshadowing to how eventually we'll see Merry stabbing that same person in his leg and his blade perishing. It's definitely a little bit of foreshadowing to that.
Yeah. I wanted to ask a question.
Yeah.
Can the ring wraiths take the ring? Do they need Frodo to
willfully give it up?
Well, no. Do they need Frodo to be the one to carry it to Mordor? Like, if he dropped it, would they like pick it up and take it?
That's a great question. The fact that we don't know that like directly is such a like testament to how complex these books are. Like between the two of us, how many times we read this book?
Right. It's not. I don't think it's in here. I mean,
it's not.
I mean, there might be some more background stuff, in the Legendarium or whatever. But
so reading Tolkien's letters, I think, and this is not obvious, but it is consistent when you read the book. I'd never thought of it in this way until I read his letters and he responded to some inquiries that people wrote. And then reading the draft history, kind of like seeing how he was toying with ways to end the story. One of the ways that he was thinking about ending the story of the ring is Frodo refusing to throw the ring in the fire, putting it on as he does, claiming it as his own as he does.
Yeah.
The Nazgul immediately sensing that he's done so, Sauron commanding them to go and meet him at Mount Doom.
Right.
But then when they get there, Frodo commands them to stop and they listen.
Oh.
Because he has mastery over them because he has claimed the ring.
Yeah, sure.
And, even though he is not a powerful person like Gandalf or Aragorn or whatever, it still means something. Like, he still has enough command over them to tell them what to do. And now reading it this time, after having read that, it seems like, they kind of like, they tell him like, come with us to Mordor. I think they're almost like kind of expecting him to do it willingly. But yeah, I wonder if they struck him down, if they'd be able to just pick it up off the ground. I imagine.
Right. They're expecting this. I mean, the plan, it seems to me, is that they expected this wraithification process to go faster, for him to be less resilient.
Yes.
For his willpower to be more compromised by, being sick and whatever the magic or poison is that's in the blade. And we find out in the next chapter that he literally has like a piece of metal that's like moving toward his heart.
Yeah.
And so there is something, it is more complicated than like
just trying to kill him
or just trying to get, the object. There's a whole existential piece in there. And so, yeah, but I still have questions about, I mean, I don't know if that's answerable, but I still have questions about the wraiths and exactly what their abilities are. They can sit on a horse.
Yes.
Can they pick up a ring?
Well, they can pick up a sword.
Right. And if they picked up a ring, would they then be tempted to, I mean, the Witch King of Angmar, would he somehow be tempted? Or is he so, right?
I
Like,
don't
could
think
he
so.
put the ring on? Like, I don't think so.
I don't
But
think they would ever claim it. I think they're so fully enslaved by Sauron that they can't, like, like the word they use is like thraldom, which is like where we get the word like enthralled. So
yeah,
they're slaves to Sauron, and they don't have will apart from Sauron's will.
I see.
Um,
Yeah, that makes sense.
so they can't be. I don't think they could be tempted to claim the ring, but I do think that if Frodo claimed the ring, which he has not,
Mm-hmm.
even though he does refer to it as my ring or our ring,
That's different than
several
like,
times.
I'm the ring, the Lord of the
I
Ring.
am the Lord of the Rings, right? I mean, that's like
Right.
a very different claim. But I think that if he were to, as he does in the end of the story, claim the ring as his own, and to claim that he's the master of the ring, I think the ring race would have to listen to him. I don't think that they would be able to stab him. I don't think they'd be able to force him to do anything, or at least they would have to like pretend to listen to him. They would be, at least they would still have like an ulterior motive,
Yeah.
and they would try to get him to come to Mordor willingly. But I think they would probably do it through flattery or, his own
Right.
delusion. They would twist towards getting him to come. That's something that, yeah, if other people have really strong opinions about this, I'd be really interested for you to email us and let us know. But it's definitely something that I've not heard really anybody else talk about that much.
I think it's a really interesting conversation, and I think it's like you said. I think the fact that the sort of main object, right? It's like the main noun
Yeah.
in the book, like in the entire book, like
Yeah, so the
Lord of the
title,
Rings. The One Ring is sort of, it's so important.
Obfuscated. What's
Yeah,
the word? I mean, it's like,
it's like it's
still
still
shrouded in-
mysterious.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
really, and every time I read it, it's even more mysterious. Actually,
I always end a reading thinking like, okay, I have like, or like reading a Tolkien like textbook or whatever. I end the reading and I'm like, all right, like I finally kind of have a grasp on it. And then you ask me just now, could they take the ring? And I'm like, well, obviously yes, but like, I don't think it's as obvious an answer as that.
no, it really is like a holy text in that way, And there are like,
Yeah.
I feel like there are like traditions of interpretation and stuff around some of this stuff. Like you can kind of like choose, like, well, what do I believe in what do I believe about this? I've read these like 4 interpretations, and one of them has more resonance for me, and I guess that makes me whatever. So yeah. Anyway, here's something I think incredibly interesting, and this is throughout. It happens a few times this chapter.
Yeah.
They find the knife. They're trying to figure out what's going on with Frodo.
Mm-hmm.
The blade, vanishes like smoke.
Like smoke. Yeah. So cool.
Then it says that Aragorn sat down on the ground, took the dagger hilt and laid it on his knees, and sang over it a slow song in a strange tongue. Then, setting it aside, he turned to Frodo and in a soft tone spoke words the others could not catch. From the pouch of his belt, he drew out the long leaves of a plant. Then we hear about this plant, what it is. It has these healing properties.
Yeah.
But it all starts with these like songs, and what I wrote in my notes here is song and word of power.
Yeah. Yeah.
That Aragorn has some kind of like spiritual connection to whatever, the like beyond the veil or something like that.
Yeah.
That can heal Frodo in some way. And of course, if we throw forward all the way to the Return of the King, he's like the healer king, right?
Yeah. The hands of the king are the hands of a healer. Yeah.
But in this case, his powers are fairly limited.
Mm-hmm. And he recognizes that it's beyond his skill to heal.
he still has some. It's not just. It's like the combination of the song and the words.
Yeah.
And then his like what I would think of as like pharmaceutical knowledge.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's like
altogether.
He has like herb lore,
right?
He understands what medicine that you find in the forest will help, but he also does this incantation. Like it's like in church, like if someone sings a prayer, you call it a cantor, right? I mean, it's like
same root probably.
And like in Spanish, it's encanto. There's like a sense of like singing, magic words. And we talk over and over again about how, and especially on this reading, I'm just really looking for it. The word command being used. And that's really what magic is in Tolkien. It's that you speak a word and then people or plants or knives or rivers or whatever are compelled to, obey your command. We see this in small ways, like with just leaders of men being like, go here, and people go, and they want to be told what to do. When Gandalf tells the hobbits what to do, they do it. It's not in the sense because they're like being, have a spell put over them in like the way that we think of it, but at its basic level, I think that's what spells are in Tolkien. It's like you tell someone or something to do something and it does it. And I think it's interesting that he sings it, because we talked about how Tom Bombadil and the way that he moves throughout the world is very similar to the Finnish epic poems, the Kalevala.
Yeah.
And how the way Bombadil like moves through the story is by just constantly singing, but also as he moves through the world, as he sings, nature like just moves out of his way. Rain doesn't get him wet.
Yeah.
He tells Old Man Willow to open up, and he does, and he does it by singing to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so it seems like Strider is kind of tapping into that same magic here. He's saying an incantation over this blade, and then he is taking this herb, which we find out came to Middle Earth from Numenor.
Oh yeah.
It came from the West.
Do we know what it is? I mean, is it an herb that we would know?
I don't know. That's a great question.
Yeah. I wonder if he was ever asked that question.
Almost certainly.
Yeah.
There's several books about the flora and fauna of Middle Earth.
And that'd be cool to read.
Almost certainly it's in there. I mean, it's given a couple different names in the story. It's Athalas, and then in English it's given as Kingsfoil. But it says here, it's a healing plant that the men of the West brought to Middle Earth. Athalas, they named it, and it grows now sparsely and only near places where they dwelt or camped of old. So I would imagine that it's not something that Tolkien has like a modern parallel to now that the Numenorians are gone. Seems like it only kind of hangs to the earth where they walk or dwell.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
But kind of just following up on this, like after, so the fragrance of the Athalas revives Frodo, but it also revives the other hobbits. They feel encouraged by it, and they feel calm, and they feel their minds clear. And after that, Frodo's in a lot of pain. It says he can't really lift his hand, but it says he bitterly regretted his foolishness and reproached himself for weakness of will. For he now perceived that in putting on the ring, he obeyed not his own desire, but the commanding wish of his enemies. So there's that word again, command. It seems like that's the wraith's power. They are able to compel him through his weakness.
Yeah, through the power of fear.
And they make him think that it's his own idea.
Yeah, gosh, that touches on so many little ways in our own, lives and context. I just think about advertising. You're like, oh, I really want Taco Bell sounds good. You're like, why is that? I mean, it's because that advertising just worms into your head,
Yeah, yeah.
And although Taco Bell would never harm me, I don't think.
It's harmed me. We'll just leave it at that.
Not willingly. It's probably something I did. you know.
Verily, I come to you.
Taco Bell would never harm me.
Yeah, speak for
But
yourself. It's done some major damage to me. I've been wraithified by
wraithified
Taco Bell a
by
few times.
Taco Bell, sure. But yeah, it's this chapter is full of that stuff. Power
Yeah,
over. I mean, it even says the herb had some power over the wound.
yeah,
That's an interesting way. I mean, it's sort of old fashioned and mythic, I guess, but like maybe
yeah.
I'm
It's a
just reading.
non-medical way of thinking about healing, like
Yeah,
non-scientific. It's
exactly.
like the medicine tells you to do it, and so you listen. The
Right.
medicine tells you to feel better.
Yeah, the plant is somehow enchanted in some way, and
Yeah.
but it does have some effect on Frodo, and
Well, I mean, as you said, the word enchant, I hear chant.
chant
Like
Encanto. You said Encanto earlier. Yeah, those are all
like the chanting of a priest or the chanting of a
right.
a druid or whatever. Can we talk about the Morgul blade really quickly?
Yeah,
I think it's really interesting that Tolkien chooses for like the most evil characters in the book. They have this weapon that is poisoned and that leaves shrapnel in the bodies of its victims.
yeah.
I don't want to like read too far into his World War I experience. I think that this is probably just a universal problem of war, but so many laws were changed after World War I, like international laws about just like the rules of war around the shape that blades could be. There was a popular blade that was it was really two blades that were welded together to form like almost like a cross shape. So when you made a cut, it would cut in two directions, and it's made it almost impossible to suture.
Yeah, right.
And also, of course, poison, mustard gas.
Not to mention just infection, right? I mean,
yeah.
I mean, there's a way in which what's happened to Frodo is he's infected by something. Yeah, but
and so Tolkien certainly would have seen people with just horrendous wounds, but also just like minor wounds that didn't seem like they should cause someone to die, but then they would just kind of waste away very quickly. In Tolkien's own case, he was only at the Somme for a very brief period of time because he got ill and was taken away and was invalided in a hospital for months and months. And his good friend C.S. Lewis had shrapnel in his body all through their friendship because of his experience at the same like horrendous battle, and he had to have it surgically removed when he was an older man. And so I think there's definitely something about this Morgul blade that echoes his World War I experience. It's a blade that disappears. It's a like smoke, so it's almost got like a gas, like a poison gas kind of code to it.
Yeah,
but there's something insidious about an enemy that you can't see.
Yeah, its effects are as strong as when it isn't. Like even when it isn't there, its effects are as strong as it was when it was, a solid object.
Right. And just the idea of the shrapnel is kind of, it says it's working its way towards Frodo's heart.
Yeah.
That just really struck me this time. After having read Tolkien's War by a scholar named Garth, that's very well worth reading.
Yeah.
And he doesn't spend a lot of time talking about Lord of the Rings, which I really actually appreciate. It's just really a historical book about the Somme and about. It's not like, oh, this is how Lord of the Rings is inspired by World War I. It's not that. It's a historical account of Tolkien in the war and his friends who died. But yet you can almost hear like in the desperation in Sam and the other hobbits' voices, you can almost hear the desperation of soldiers that Tolkien would have heard, who lost friends and just didn't understand why.
I mean, certainly that question, one guy gets hit with shrapnel and ends up with a infection that kills him, and another guy gets hit with shrapnel and gets to teach at Oxford and
Yeah.
drink beers at the, Bird and
Eagle and
Child.
Child.
Yeah, Eagle and Child. And it just feels sort of capricious in some way. And I think, even though, this isn't an allegory for that, it's still, I could see, working that out in fiction and casting. It's really not about the ring wraiths being, whatever, the Germans.
Yeah. No.
It's about, they're like a manifestation of war.
Yeah.
They're like a manifestation of the worst parts of human nature, the greed that led them to take the rings from Sauron in the first place.
Yeah.
And the kind of just vagaries of, the way that war is used as a political tool and things. And so,
yeah, the way that war is used by distant, far off powers,
by the powers and principalities, right? Like they show up in your life and you can't even see them. They don't even have it doesn't have a physical effect or it has a physical effect on you, but it itself is not manifested in a physical way. No. And that's way scarier in some ways than somebody with jackboots showing up.
It's never occurred to me until you said it exactly that way, that another question that I've always had about Lord of the Rings, apart from what does the ring do, is why don't we ever see Sauron? Like we never see Sauron.
Yeah, he doesn't have a physical body, right?
Well, so I think he does have a physical body.
Are you sure?
Yeah. Because when Gollum describes Sauron later, he says he has 9 fingers on his black hands.
Oh gosh, that's true.
So we get glimpses. I think he is in the Tower of Barad-dûr. He is embodied. He's not beautiful to look at anymore, but he has a body. Right. And I think part of the problem with the Peter Jackson films is that we tend to think of him as a disembodied eye, but the eye of Sauron is spiritual, not physical.
Yeah, right.
But he has a physical body at this point. He's been reconstituted. Started out in Mirkwood, and then he makes his way to the Dark Tower, and that's where he is. His physical body is there, and so, but we never see him. I mean, we get little glimpses, like Gollum describes his hands. Aragorn sees him through the Palantir. Yeah. Supposedly, he's seeing his physical body,
right?
But we don't really see him. We don't get to hear his inner dialogue really. We don't see his physical presence. But I mean, if you're a soldier on the Somme in World War I, you don't see the Kaiser.
Yeah, you might as well be invisible.
Yeah.
Right.
There's this like force, this power that is commanding, people to do things, and they listen and they do his command to the best of their ability, but you don't actually see that power yourself. So in a lot of sense, I mean, it really is like, I think one of the truer depictions of war that we get.
An ideology.
In World War II, you never saw Hitler face to face.
Yeah. And that, again, that's like where will comes in. You're still fighting the like will of some man's, insane lust for power and domination.
Yeah.
And so then to personify that as these ring wraiths is a working out of like, what is it like to contend against somebody else's will? Even though he embodies it less, like, I mean, the orcs are, problematic in some ways, but they're also in the thrall of this will.
100%. They're like the ants that are, being without a queen, they scatter.
Right. And Aragorn, I think later on in this chapter, says something about evil men or wicked men who were turned by the Witch King or by
the evil king of Angmar. Yeah. They are making their way as quickly as they can to
the bridge, right?
To the bridge, and they're not sure that it's not going to be held against them. But when they get there, they find a single pale green jewel that they call an elf stone. And they're not sure exactly who left it. I mean, we'll find out later that it's Glorfindel, but Aragorn says, I'll take it as a sign that we may pass the bridge, but beyond it, dare not keep to the road without some clearer token.
Yeah, they do cross the bridge in safety. It says they were glad to leave the cheerless lands and the perilous road behind them, but this new country seemed threatening and unfriendly.
Yeah, troll country.
And the hills start to rise, and there's, ominous walls of stone and ruins of towers. Frodo is reminded of Bilbo's account of his journey in the threatening towers on the hills of the north of the road. And so I think that would be kind of thrilling if you're a fan of The Hobbit. All you've read is The Hobbit. You get these little glimpses. We get more, as the chapter goes on here. But that would be so exciting. And people talk about fan service these days and sort of like slag it off, like, oh, well, that's just fan service. I'm like, yeah, well, it's also like the way good stories are, right?
Yeah.
Like there's like something fun about that, I think.
There's a little bit of like hey, remember in the last book when remember how the trolls the jelly, and you remember that?
Yeah. I love it though. I think it's, I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's like overdone now with Marvel movies and stuff, but I think it's exciting to hear about Bilbo.
I think so too. And like, it's one of the, there's really like The Hobbit is so simple. The Hobbit is really just like 7 stories told back to back. It's just like,
right.
And this is the very first adventure that Bilbo has. And so it's a fun, but it also, I mean, like looking at all the adventures that get them to this point and all the dangers that they've had to endure.
Yeah.
In The Hobbit, this is like they leave Hobbiton, and then it says they go on a hike and that not everything was great, but it was pretty easy. Mm-hmm. And then they get to the trolls, and that's like the very first thing that happens to them. Yeah. But when you see like, okay, what stories were not told about the journey from Hobbiton to was it called the Inton Moors? The which comes from the Old English word int, which means giant, which is right. Where we get the word giant from,
right?
And what will eventually become the Ints,
right?
But who were not necessarily, or who were not trees in the beginning. The Ints in Tolkien's imagination were just giants.
Yeah.
But we get this kind of delightful little aside where, once again, if we were editing Tolkien ourselves, what a ridiculous, like, mm-hmm. Like what sort of de-escalation of the tension.
Yeah.
They're being pursued by Black Riders. They're like, we don't know if we're gonna be able to cross this bridge. And then they cross the bridge. And then we get this little aside about them finding the 3 trolls that Bilbo and the dwarves found in The Hobbit. Right. And we have to say, I think that both of us were pretty taken aback by the fact that there is a use of the word boner
in Sam's little song here.
So they're sad. Well, so at first they're scared, and Pippin is like, "Hey, you guys get out of that cave. Like I got a bad feeling about this." And they're like, "We're gonna go check the road up front." Pippin comes back and he's like, "Troll alert! There's trolls up here." And Strider's like, "Hold on, let me like grab a stick, and then I'll go ahead and make sure everything's okay." Which I think that the fact that he grabs a stick sort of reinforces what we were saying last time, which is that he's definitely not carrying another sword.
He's not carrying another sword, and maybe he's got a bow, but he doesn't even have like another weapon other than maybe like a knife or something.
I don't know. Like it doesn't like anytime he fights recently, he's been fighting with a stick with fire on the end of it. So I don't even know if he has a bow or a knife or anything. I think he just has that broken sword he's carrying around. But
Strider also knows that it's daytime and that trolls are not walking around outside during the day.
Exactly. And he kind of roasts Pippin about it. He's like, Not only have you forgotten your family history, right. You also have forgotten everything that you know about trolls.
Yeah, right.
Which is like, it's like midday, full sunshine. Like there's no trolls out here. And so he like breaks the breaks the stick on the back of the trolls. But one cute little thing that I thought was funny was that Pippin follows behind bravely because he doesn't want Strider to see that he was still scared.
Right.
Like they're all still trying to impress Strider. He's cool. He's like the cool older.
Well, and it is the way that a kid tries to impress, like his your like older cousin or whatever.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. Yeah. He's like, well, I'm not that I'm scared of it or anything. I mean,
right. I just wanted to let you know.
Yeah.
So what do you think about this song by Sam?
It's a tough read. It's a tough read. No offense to anybody who really loves Tolkien's poetry, and we'll talk about his use of the word boner in a minute. Which I mean, I wish that I could say that I didn't like just explode into fits of laughter when I realized that the word boner was in this, but I did. All right, so what do we think? And I have done some reading on this, so I'm not going to like set a trap for you like I did last episode.
Well, my first thought was like, okay, so I don't think Tolkien is talking about, the way we think about boners, but my first thought was like, well, maybe he means like boner as in like, did a boner, like made a mistake. So I actually looked up the etymology of that, and that comes from, it's early enough. It comes from like 1915 or something like that, but it's an American reference and it references baseball. And so it's probably not, I would guess it's not that.
Tolkien, big baseball fan, you think?
Yeah. Tolkien probably wasn't a big baseball fan. Although then I thought, there's a lot of American soldiers in England and, between World War I and World War II. And so maybe he picked it up, but even then I don't think so. Then what I chalk it up to is like just sort of like a nonsense word, but I'm curious to hear what you found.
Well, okay. So I found a couple things. So in Britain preceding this book, the word boner was sometimes used to describe a body snatcher.
Oh, sure.
So somebody who like abducts you and takes away your bones. Now, I do think it's interesting that the rhyme is boner.
Yeah.
So it's like you, I don't know. It's just actually
donate
the donor
organ.
that's like you donate. Maybe it's like you give your body to a body snatcher, donor or boner. So that's a possibility.
Yeah.
But also like in English, we still do have bonehead. Right. Like we call someone like boneheaded or, like a numbskull, someone who's thick. So I think that's probably what it is, but I can't imagine if it's a song about a troll who eats people, it like the idea of like someone who abducts you and eats your bones. I mean, I think that's a boner is someone who abducts, but it definitely didn't have any sexual connotation.
It's impossible to read it without that now though. I mean,
the cackling seventh grader laughter that I had listening to this, it just really tickled me.
Yeah.
In the draft history of Lord of the Rings, we get alternate drafts of the Man in the Moon poem that Frodo recites at the Prancing Pony. And in that, there is a line where it says and anyone forgive me if I'm not remembering this perfectly, but the plate and the spoon making love, which when I first read that, I was like, ooh, like that's, the plate and the spoon making love. That's not an image that I really wanted or needed.
No.
But in looking that up back in Tolkien's time, that had a connotation of like, it was like a Jane Austen romantic, that you make love by looking at someone affectionately and professing that you love them. That's what making love is in that sense. And then making love as a sexual connotation came from that. So I think it's probably a similar thing where it has an older usage and then maybe it's adopted for a more, impolite usage later.
Yeah. Interesting.
I think it's interesting. Frodo says, I'm learning a lot about Sam Gamgee on this journey. First, he was a conspirator. Now he's a jester. He'll end up becoming a wizard or a warrior, which is a great little bit of foreshadowing because Sam will become a warrior.
Absolutely. It's one of the great moments in the book, I think, actually. It's one of my favorite moments in the book when Sam
the elf warrior.
Yeah. Sam goes ape on,
love it.
On, what's the name of that spider?
Shelob.
Shelob, yeah, I blanked on the name of it. When
And he just
Sam,
kills himself like a dozen orcs single-handedly and
yeah, it's so cool.
rescues Frodo from a tower. Hey,
Um,
there's some imagery there. The damsel in distress.
the
He's
damsel in
coming to.
distress, absolutely. Um, and so Sam says, "Well, I hope not."
Yeah,
He doesn't.
he's so humble.
He's very humble. So that yeah, they have this little aside into the Hobbit, and
And then we get clippity clippity clip, and here comes everyone's favorite high elf, Glorfindel.
I love the details that they have bells on the
Yeah,
horses,
yeah,
small bells tinkling,
yeah,
and then they hear them even clearer as he comes closer, and we get this cool description of what he looks like. The rider's cloak streamed behind him, and his hood was thrown back. His golden hair flowed shimmering in the wind of his speed, so he's really moving.
yeah.
And then I think this is worth looking at. It says, to Frodo, it appeared that a white light was shining through the form and raiment of the rider, as if through a thin veil.
Yeah.
So this idea that, and then later on, we find out that, I think it's in the next chapter, that elves exist sort of in two worlds.
Yeah.
They exist in our own physical reality, but they also exist in, because they spent time in
Valinor.
Valinor, they are sort of infused with this otherworldly thing, and Frodo can see it, and Frodo can see it because he got stabbed, because he's being wraithified, right?
Yeah, he's thinning. He's
yeah.
He's leaving the material world and entering into the spiritual realm.
So here we have a first glimpse of Frodo kind of starting to slip into some sort of like liminal space between the two,
Yeah,
between two realities, or two,
not living, not dead,
two planes.
Yeah.
And I think even Gandalf in the next chapter sort of says that it's almost as if a transparency has been kind of drawn over Frodo.
Yeah.
And so he becomes something else.
Yeah.
And starts to have some powers of vision and things that he otherwise wouldn't have.
That's right.
Strider springs from hiding and dashes down toward the road. They're like
so happy to see Glorfindel.
They're like overjoyed to see each other. And these guys they're like what? Like stepbrothers in a way, right? Like,
well, yeah, like almost like foster brothers, I would say.
Foster brothers, where
he would have seen him grow up.
Yeah, he would have seen him grow up, and he's Aragorn has become this man now, and so he they ran and they run to meet each other, and Glorfindel even jumps off his horse.
Yeah. And a little spoiler about Glorfindel when we get to season 27 of Wayward Wizards and we read the Silmarillion.
Yeah.
Glorfindel has a major role in the first age.
Mm-hmm.
This guy is not just good with a sword. This guy fought and killed a Balrog.
He's like the
single-handedly.
Best. Yeah, right.
Like he did what Gandalf does. Like, and so it seems,
but he didn't die. He did it better.
No, he died.
Oh, he did die, and
was reincarnated again, just like Gandalf.
Oh, fascinating! I didn't know that part.
Yeah, so he was given like a second body.
So that's cool.
So Glorfindel is a major badass, and that's why he doesn't seem like he's afraid of Black Riders. Like he's like, yeah, I came across a few of them, but
I ran
towards them and then they just went away. Yeah. Like he's got major spiritual power,
right?
And he's this ancient being,
mm-hmm.
And so like there's no one that you would rather have on your side than Glorfindel. And it's kind of a miracle that he isn't chosen to go with the company, because he's probably got the highest XP rating of anyone at Rivendell.
Yeah,
The only one of them is like taking down a Balrog. So I wonder if Merry and Pippin really were the best choice for the last 2 slots. Like maybe they could have thrown Glorfindel and maybe one of the sons of Elrond in there and just gotten a little more useful companions that don't have to carry on their backs. But anyway, that's just an aside.
Good for Frodo, I think, but maybe not the best party construction you could have hoped for. So before we get to like the real action, which takes us to the end of the chapter, Glorfindel says, I'm here to find you. I was sent from Rivendell.
Yeah.
Actually, people were sent all over the place. Gandalf has not reached Rivendell, so we still don't know where he is. And Glorfindel says, Elrond received news that troubled him. Some of my kindred, journeying in your land beyond the Baranduin, or Baranduin, learned that things were amiss. And then in my edition, at the bottom of 204, we have Baranduin, and then there's an asterisk and a footnote. I love a footnote in a fiction book. The Brandywine River. Right?
Brandywine.
So Tolkien has put a little linguistics lesson in here.
Yeah.
Brandywine, Brandywine,
yeah.
Branduin. So we see the way that the Elvish word Branduin turns into Brandywine, and if you say
or vice versa, I'm not sure.
Yeah, or vice versa. I suppose it's possible that the hobbits named the Brandywine, and it became Branduin. But
I think it told us back in the last chapter if it was Brandy Buck that became Brandywine, or if it was Brandywine brought the Brandy Bucks. But yeah, I loved that. Branduin.
And so that's how linguistics works. Like, a word enters into culture, or somebody just says the word over and over again and with an accent, and it becomes, a new word,
a different word. Yeah.
So I love that Tolkien's kind of put that little linguistics lesson right there in the bottom. And I'm just a sucker for a footnote in a fiction book. So
a footnote in a fiction book, man. And this little aside that like our guy Gildor.
Yeah.
Our guy Gildor, like,
he came through, right?
He came through. He said, we're going to send word ahead of you. And he sure did. And if he hadn't, they would have been French toast, man.
Absolutely.
So it's, Gildor, take what friends as you may that are trustworthy. And he was trustworthy too. He really saves the day.
Yeah. So Glorfindel is here. He puts Frodo on his horse and says, my horse will not let any rider fall that I command him to bear. I love that. The horse, and it actually connects back to Bill Ferny's pony, learning to kind of like, take steps so that Frodo doesn't fall off. So animals in general have this kind of, special power that they are able to.
He's kind of like a proto Shadowfax a little bit, like Shadowfax is like so sure-footed and, but yeah, I love the connection to Bill the pony, not letting Frodo fall off up to this point.
Frodo wants to say like, well, I can't leave. I don't want to leave my friends in danger, which is nice.
Yeah.
And Glorfindel sort of smiles and laughs at him and says,
they wouldn't be in danger if you weren't
here. You are the danger, right? Yeah. Like you're the one who's drawing them here.
And that's exactly what happens. Like when they finally tell Asphaleth to flee, right. In that famous scene in the movies that they give to Arwen, which I think was actually like a really great move to
it's cool.
give Arwen some of Glorfindel's like badassness,
right?
Because she has like so little to do in the books apart from just be like the object of Aragorn's romantic desire or whatever,
right?
The new Luthien, but when he says like go Asphaleth, and he like I imagine he like slaps him on the butt, and Frodo. Actually, he probably wouldn't slap a horse.
Well, he says
it's not very elf-like.
He uses this word of command. He says, "Fly." He called, "Fly. The enemy is upon us."
Yes.
And the white horse leaped forward.
Nirolim Asphaleth.
That's great. Right on. And we get some really, I think, cool descriptions of how fast this horse is. The Black Riders can't keep up at all.
But they do. They command Frodo to stop, and he stops.
Right. So
You know,
there we have that idea of the will again.
and the word command again. It says, suddenly he knew in his heart that they were silently commanding him to wait.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when Glorfindel commands Osvaloth to flee in Elvish.
Right.
You know, he says, you know, ride on.
Do you think that Glorfindel wanted the horse to why didn't the horse take an eagle to Rivendell? He says fly.
Fly, you fools.
Isn't that what he meant?
He was telling them to get on an eagle.
Why didn't
That's one of the worst Reddit internet theories I've ever.
Anyway.
We're going to have to cut that out or people are going to be confused.
Learn a word, nerds.
Fly. It says fly. Oh, I can't wait till we get to argue about whether Balrogs have wings.
Yeah, they clearly don't.
So, I think they do. Okay, all right. So. I can't wait till we argue about this.
I don't.
Have we ever had this argument? I don't think we have.
No, we haven't. I don't think they do.
Okay, all right. We're gonna talk about it.
We can have a good conversation. Yeah, we can have a good conversation about literalism in text
metaphor.
Text. Yeah,
but it does. At one point, it does say that it stretches out its wings.
I think it appears like they have wings.
At one point, it says he stretched out his wings.
Yeah,
but we'll get to that point.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, okay. Where were we? We just had my aside where I asked why he didn't take an eagle to Rivendell. And then
Glorfindel commands the horse to run, and the horse listens to him. The horse goes even when Frodo is being, pulled back by the will of the Black Riders. And he's clearly very ill at this point. He is slipping into the wraith world, and so he will be commanded by them, and he does listen, but he goes across the shallow waters of the ford, and it says, in any case he felt that he was commanded urgently to halt. Hatred again stirred in him, but he had no longer the strength to refuse. And so he stops, and that's where we get to the line that we started the episode with. He says, go back to the land of Mordor and follow me no more. He pulls out his sword, and he says, by Elbereth and Luthien the Fair, you shall have neither the ring nor me. And so we have Elbereth, who's the queen of the Valar, who created the stars. And we have Luthien, the most beautiful elf maid who ever lived, who sacrificed herself for her husband, chose a mortal life, but who also stole the Silmaril from the crown of Morgoth, who Aragorn told him a story about to give him hope in the last chapter.
Yeah.
But he's stricken dumb. It feels like his tongue cleaves to the roof of his mouth. His sword breaks and falls out of his shaking hand.
Why does his sword break?
It's so creepy. I think the Black Riders just command it. They're so powerful that, in the same way, I mean, he's about to break too. It's almost like he's on the edge, and it's almost like he's stronger than the steel of his sword. And his sword breaks in the midst of it. And that's when the river rises up and overtakes the Black Riders. The horses are filled with madness, and the water throws stones and boulders and takes the shape of white horses.
That's so cool. And so the three riders that were in the midst of the ford were overwhelmed, and they disappeared. And then Frodo looks across the river and sees that there's a shining figure of white light, and behind it ran small shadowy forms waving flames that flared red at the gray mist that was falling over the world.
So that's his friends following after, led by
Glorfindel. And the black horses, and presumably the ring wraiths, are so afraid of fire, of course, but also, we already talked about Glorfindel's power, that they go into the
rushing flood,
cast themselves into the rapids, and their piercing cries are drowned in the roaring of the river as it carried them away. Such a cool image. And then Frodo's overwhelmed. He heard and saw no more.
It's such a Tolkienian end to a chapter.
It's the end of the book too, right? Like,
End of
I
book
love it.
1.
Yeah.
He heard and saw no more. Just 6 words.
Yeah.
After all of his verbose descriptions,
Right.
he ends it with 6 words. Such a punctuation mark at the end of this like brilliant chapter. I think it's my favorite chapter of the book so far. Flight to the Ford. Great chapter.
Yeah, really good.
We got some silliness. We got some danger. We got Frodo like refusing to leave his friends, even in the face of certain death.
Yeah.
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 What more do you want?
And even when he's under the power of this wraithification process, he still wants to stand up for the people he loves.
Hell yeah.
And that's inspiring for sure.
That's the end of book 1. 1 out of 6.
Exciting.
First half of Fellowship of the Ring in the books.
Yeah. So if you enjoyed, us reading through book 1 of Fellowship of the Ring, I hope you'll share with your friends, anybody who's interested in Lord of the Rings or wants to read along. We'd love to have them read along with us, and share, rate, review, all those things.
Subscribe, like,
hit that like button, and all the rest. We're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, and we're anywhere you wanna listen to a podcast. We'll be there for you. So come along. It's a journey. And don't forget, when you're there with the bone you bone from its owner, donor boner.